All right, good morning. Closing this thing out. Let's see if we can land this plane today. Resilient faith, withstanding the challenges of living in a hostile world. All of the things that we've talked about thus far leading up to today. I wanted to make sure we got to Christian community because there's a special dynamic here in what we're going to talk about today that a lot of this that we've talked about feels like a lot of individual effort. Feels like a lot of things that we are doing between ourselves and God as we're learning about what is threatening my faith, right? What am I doing as I fight spiritual warfare? The tools that the Spirit has given me, I have to engage with those. I have to work on holiness. I have to work on pursuing and getting rid of those things out of my own life that are standing between me and God. I have to know and articulate what I believe to other people. And so the connection here that we're going to talk about today is talking about Christian community that really know this is not an individual effort. It can be, but you're hampered severely when you are doing this by yourself. And so God has made us to live in community with each other. He established a church for a reason, not just for this, but this is a very special part of why the church exists, is that we have each other to rely on. We have each other to help us grow, to challenge us when maybe they see things about us that we don't see, where we could use a little motivation, a little discipline from time to time, right? Community is good for those things. But as well as strengthening each other, strengthening ourselves for this fight where we can get bogged down in some of these areas and not even sure what to do next. And so we have somebody, hopefully you have somebody that you have a special connection with in this congregation, that you husband or wife, that's great, but somebody else as well, right? You're connected further outside your family into this church community here at CV to help us. So there's a strength in numbers aspect of this, as well as there's a few other things we're going to talk about. I am going to try to sort of fly through this and get to a little bit of discipleship stuff. If we don't get there, that's fine. Hopefully whatever we get to will be useful. I closed out last week with this. I think most of you were in here and saw this already, but this picture that I've been using sort of as the header slide for all of the lessons, this arch in Utah and the Arches National Park, that it's this resistant rock that stands above the rest of all of this valley where things have you can see the stream down here that's continuing to slowly eat away what's there. And this is left standing for you to see, to hold up what strength looks like. And yet it's only one of many. It's not the only one. It's not Arch National Park, it's Arches. There are others. And on this little plateau or this mesa where this one is, that the other photo was taken from somewhere down here that I've been using, you can look just around the corner and there's four other, it's like a double in the back there, also standing up tall. And so it stands together as one of several, not just one all by itself. And that imagery is really what we're after here. I don't stand tall on an island, I stand tall alongside each of you. Each of you in here has helped shape me in some form or fashion into who I am, and I hope that we're all doing that for each other here as well. As we think about what it means to live in community and this idea of strength in numbers or safety in numbers, I thought of a couple of examples. The penguins in Antarctica, right? It's really cold. Talk about living in a hostile world, right? I don't like it when it gets down to 32 and the wind starts blowing a little bit here. A Lancaster level, a 30-mile-an-hour gust is uncomfortable at that temperature, and yet these birds live in the most inhospitable place on the planet, and they do it by surviving together. They keep each other safe in this colony. They keep the young ones safe, but they keep each other safe. They're a shield against the wind. So, penguins, if you're in the middle of the mass, eventually your turn's going to come where you have to work your way to the outside, and those that were on the outside get a chance of some respite inside. And they're constantly shifting and protecting each other from the wind and protecting the young ones. It's also a shield against predators, right? When you have thousands of penguins in this huddled mass, well, what are the What is it? What gets them down there? Is it seals or
Polar bears.
walruses? The orcas get them when they're swimming looking for food, but the predator is not going to be able to take on thousands of them in one mass. The ones on the outside are kind of, the sacrificial lamb, I guess. I don't know, but you're safe when you're all together in a group. And if they were instead all scattered, that lone gazelle out on the savannah and the lion is hunting that gazelle through the grass, and it's easier picked off when it's just one, but when you got a whole herd, right? It's different. The phrase circling the wagons, right? Back to some frontier imagery when you were traveling across the wilderness, headed out towards the west to get your gold or whatever it is you're after, right? In the 1800s, what would they do? They stop for the night and they build a camp, and they're gonna circle up. They're gonna get everybody that's vulnerable in the middle. The women and the children will make camp around the fire there, and the men will take turns standing watch around the outside, so that when trouble comes, it almost always came. They were as safeguarded as they could be. They were prepared for it. And so the same is true of our community here as Christians, right? We're not meant to venture out into the unknown all on our own, be on an island. There's safety in numbers. We circle the wagons around each other. We protect each other from the onslaught of the winds and the predators, where we're a lot safer together. What do you think about this? Agree or disagree that modern Christianity in a Western context, this would not be true all over the world necessarily, tends to prioritize our individual relationship with God and minimize the importance of committing to a shared life with other believers in the local church? Do you agree or disagree with that? I kind of see this trend happening. Does anybody else see it, or would you like to say, I don't think that's true?
I sometimes see the opposite happening as well.
Yeah?
This is absolutely true in some cases.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have a loyalty to their group without looking up.
Without looking up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe even when we do this, we prioritize the
Right.
us
Sometimes.
and neglect that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any thoughts on this? Have you seen this play out before, where the individual relationship with God takes a priority over pushing? And this is interesting. This is the group where I would least expect this to be true. You're here in Bible class together, sort of, I hate to say going the extra mile, but we're here together, and I look around. This is a group that is comprised of people who love to be together. I've seen all of you involved in small groups or discipleship groups over the years. A fair bit of my small group and former small group, is in here. So this is a group that gets it as I look around the room here. But what do we see happening? One place I see this is, it wouldn't be necessarily true at CV. We are very careful not to push this, but online church. Do you have any friends that their Christian experience is they consume online church? They may go once in a while, but for most of the time. This happened during 2020 when we all did it out of necessity just to keep things going, right? We did this here where for a few weeks, 2 months maybe even, that Jeff and Danny and Isaac would gather here at the building, and Robbie was here to make sure the technology worked and it all got uploaded. And a couple of us recorded things and uploaded them. I think Paul did one like that, where we uploaded a message to something when the church saw some thoughts that we prepared around the Lord's Supper or something like that. But that was like, in that moment we did it because we had to, and there are a growing number of people doing this because they choose to. What do you think?
I think we see it in the broad culture of Christianity.
Yeah.
With the whole thing around deconstruction these days, and that word's got some different meanings, but it's been going on for years. People try and come up with their own. They're like, I don't need anybody else to have a relationship with God. It's between me and Him.
Yeah.
And so we kind of come up with our own a la carte view of spirituality.
Yeah.
This is what I want. This is what I don't want. That tastes good to me, so I'll take that. But I'm not really sure I want that part of it.
Yeah.
And then we kind of come up with our own. We're going to define relationship with God on our own terms.
Yeah.
And so there's that out there in the broader context of
Yeah.
things. People, they want to, they claim to be an evangelical or they claim to be a believer, but there's a lot of things that they would deny,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so, but that's okay with them because that's, again, it becomes subjective. It's their view, it's their way of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah, my when I worked at Lowe's at my summer job during first couple years of college, I was out in the garden center, and my supervisor out there had a view much like that of, I talk about, well, if you could please not schedule me for Sunday mornings, I'll come in, I can be there by noon, and I'll close out the rest of the day, and I'll work any other night as late as you want me, or come open. Could I ask for that time to be special for me? And she was okay to honor that. And we played the team game where I would cover somebody else's shift throughout the week if I had to jump in on an extra one. I was good to make sure I was doing my part so I could get that time for myself. And one time she asked me, why are you so against missing a Sunday morning? I was like, well, just because it's very important for me to be there and have the personal contact with people. That did it for me. I need that. That's always been part of my life. And so she said, well, I don't fully understand that, but I'll keep working with you. In my view is that it's, again, my view, it's between me and God, and that's what matters. And the rest of it, it's extra almost. So we don't view it, some people don't view it as core like that. It's part of the picking and choosing. The hand was almost up. Your son does that a lot too. He almost raises his hand and he gets called on a lot for that. If we, so this would be a hypothetical, because I don't know that this is true for you guys in here. If we minimize the role of the local church in our spiritual lives, what might we be missing out on?
Faith.
Faith?
Faith.
Missing out on faith. How would we? Encouragement?
Yes.
Yeah, but still afraid. You don't know what's going on. It's
Okay.
figure someone's prioritizing something else
Yeah.
instead of focusing on what's supposed to be important, your relationship with God.
Yeah, without knowing it, realizing that idea of living in community, that's an important part of our faith, that idea of living in community. Just as we are supposed to live in community with God, we are to live in community with each other. That's a core part of it, right? It's not an individual faith. Yeah, Heather.
I think when you minimize that aspect, I think you minimize being hands and feet of Jesus for others.
Yeah.
And showing up for people in the way that that somebody outside of the church who doesn't know them could show up for them.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important as a community that if you see someone who just doesn't have it that day, you go over and you say, hey, I see you.
Yeah.
What do you need? Do you need prayer? Do you need a hug? Do you need me to just sit here? To be the hands and feet of Jesus for somebody else is so honoring.
Mm-hmm.
And when we take away the local church, that also gets taken away.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're not connected to people, it's hard to see, it's impossible to see their needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't be the person that steps in. Think about a time when you've needed it and someone stepped in. You can't turn around and do that for others if you're not connected. You can't be encouraged, right? In a similar way. That's one way that the encouragement happens, is being a part of a family like this, a community like this that's tied closely together. It makes the highs higher. I like to think it makes the highs higher. It also makes the lows higher. Even if you're struggling through some terrible stuff, when you get just that little ounce of encouragement, that little ounce of I see you, can I walk with you through this week? Can I pray for you? It takes a little bit of the sting out, right? To know that somebody's helping you through that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Holly.
when I was ill, I had a lung infection.
Yeah.
And just women bringing me meals so I didn't have to cook. And I had 2 kids.
Yeah.
It was like, you saved my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about all of the things that people have done for you from this church community, and imagine if no one was there to do that.
Yeah. And my family wasn't around, so
Yeah.
it was like saving.
Yeah. We've got tons of stories like that in this place. Paul.
I think one of the things you risk losing if you minimize the local church is your salvation. You're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
And you haven't grasped the big picture.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're not sincere, but you can be sincere and still be in error.
Yeah.
You forget the fact that it's a body. I think it was what Heather said.
Mm-hmm.
I asked the question once when I was in youth ministry to make the point. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's asked that question. It's like, if you had to get up tomorrow morning without one body part, which one would it be? we've all used that as an illustration.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, I don't want to get rid of anything. Well, maybe my little toe.
Yeah.
But just the same, it's like we're not just members vertically, we're members horizontally. We're a living organism.
Yeah.
And when you look at your physical body, as Paul illustrated, like in Romans 12 or 1 Corinthians 12, everybody is dependent on everybody else. You can't just do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has a function. Everything has a purpose.
Yeah, and so when one body part is absent, you clearly notice it, and the same is true at the church. There's people that have come and gone here. I'd say the short time, it's now 12 years. That's getting to be a longer time. And Paul, you guys were here like right before us, I think. So having been here for a while now, I should say, there's people that have come and gone, and you notice their absence. You notice that that person that did that thing is not here, whether they've passed, whether they've just moved to another church or they've moved away to another place entirely. There's a hole there where that person was that you notice, and it's never quite the same. Even when somebody else steps in to do the job, you still miss that person did that thing, or you had that relationship with that person. Yeah, we notice that. And sometimes we forget. We may think, well, I'm just anonymous. I don't play that big of a part. Somebody would notice, whether you think so or not. And so it's sort of a similarly related question. Maybe it's more the flip side of it. How is your life different because of your experience in a local church, in a Christian community, and having lived in close-knit relationship with other believers, sometimes that are closer than family? And for us, at this stage in our life, we've lived in Pennsylvania, 12 years next month, and we're 750 miles away from my closest family member, which is my mom, and everybody else is a little bit further out than that. By just virtue of time and physical distance, at this stage of my life, I'm a lot closer to some of you than I am to even my own blood relatives, even though we talk a lot and we visit each other on holidays especially, and so, my kids are more connected to you than some of their physical aunts and uncles. And some of you have earned the title aunt or uncle from my boys, right? Honorary church grandpa sitting in the back over here enjoying his cup of coffee. You're that for a lot of kids, not just mine. And so I sat down. I actually did this last night. I was like, I want to add to this a little bit and put some personality in it. I made a list. How has my life changed? And I'd love to open up the floor and hear from you. What has changed in my life? I've been a member in, I believe this is the fourth church since the one I grew up in. It's just I moved from place to place. I've had aunts, we called them aunts and uncles, my aunt so-and-so or uncle so-and-so, who's not related to me whatsoever, but yet they were there in the church and took an interest in our family and mentoring my parents and mentoring us and just being hospitable to us, inviting us into their home like you do with real family. And so I've developed deeper friendships than any other place that I've gotten them from. My school friends I talk to every so often, but the friendships that I have among fellow brothers and sisters in Christ are far deeper because they're a lot more personal and a lot more personally involved in each other's lives. I've gotten accountability and motivation when I needed it from people that I shared a faith connection with in a congregation. It's hard to be accountable to somebody when you don't know them and don't relate to them at all. That just doesn't work. You don't open your lives that much, right, to somebody that you're not invested in like that. I've learned new life skills. 2-3 weeks ago, or no, it was right before Thanksgiving. Church grandpa back there taught me how to change the alternator in my wife's car. There's people here that I've just learned good physical skills from, like things that I just have I could have watched YouTube and stumbled my way through it and gotten it done in about 3 hours, but he helped me do it in about 45 minutes because he knows what he's doing. So, Jim Bledsoe has taught me to cook more than I ever thought I would ever know how to cook. When I moved here, I knew how to ground beef to make spaghetti and pour in the jar of sauce, and I made a cassoulet with him about 6 months ago. There's people with things to teach you and learn from, and just have fun and experience life together, right? A place to live, actually, for a little while. Towards the end of graduate school, when we were in Virginia, our apartment lease came up, and we needed to stay somewhere for about 4 months. That is like the most awkward length of time to try to find a place to rent when you need a place to live. And it just so happened that somebody else in the church owned a townhome, and they said, well, you could rent our basement month by month until you're ready to go. My son lives like upstairs. It's like a basement, main floor upstairs, and he lives upstairs and has the kitchen would be common area, but you can have the whole bedroom, bathroom, suite down in the basement, and just pay us month to month and let us know a month out when you're ready to go. Literally found a place to live when I was in a pickle. Right? We just needed that. Family away from home. I talked about that. Spiritual growth through spiritual responsibilities. Like one of the best ways to grow as a Christian is get responsibility to do stuff. Find your talent and find a way to put it to work. And within the church is the best place to do that. You can't, it's hard to practice this when you're all on your own, right? And so more growth has happened that way for me than anything else. Being asked to learn how to lead songs and lead prayers and preach and teach Bible classes, right? A lot of growth through that. And whatever it is that you're involved in ministry, it's been a growth opportunity for you in a lot of ways, I'm sure. Support through hard times, we talked about that. Mentorship, learning how to do those things. And I think the biggest thing is that in all of these things, I've found an opportunity where I can also give these things to others. Let me open up the floor. What's something in your life that is different now? Something that you have benefited from, grown from, experienced, that's better because you live in Christian community? Robbie.
I grew up with like 5 sets of parents because of how close we were in the church growing up. And sometimes there might have been some negatives to that. Getting a phone call from Tom Clark because I'm speeding down 283. But there were a lot of adults that I could look up to that had my best interests in mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just talking about that with Heather, shut up, but
Yeah.
Heather this morning was saying how, everybody's your mom, everybody's,
Mhm.
you got a lot of grandmas, a lot of moms here,
Mm-hmm.
to fill the void.
And like Robbie said, for good reasons and for disciplinary purposes when needed, right? He's acting up, you just send him over to Tom and Janet's for a little while. That would have straightened him out, right? Same with my boys. You ever see my boys running down the hallway? Call them out. Whatever. But again, the fun times, like they gush about like, hey, we haven't been over to Miss Katie's in a while. Can we go over there and play? Even little Silas has gotten over his fear of dogs, just sometimes spent over there because he's so little, they're so big, but different set, yeah. Phil.
This doesn't answer that last question exactly.
That's okay.
My wife and I moved down here from Connecticut. We're members of the Church of Christ up there, and we moved down 20 years ago. But prior to that, we would vacation down here, and we very much enjoyed the area. But one of the highlights for us was to come to church here on Sunday. And we got to know people in the church here. We'd go out to lunch with them. So when it came time that we were ready to move down here, we already had a family here.
Yeah.
So it made the move extremely easy.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, when I graduated high school, went into the Army, and so I went from upstate New York in a small farm town to New Jersey for basic training, to Texas for the combat medic program, to Colorado in a span of 4 months for my orthopedic training and stuff. And so I was 1,800 miles from home.
Yeah.
And that far from my family. And by the grace of God, my NCOIC was my enlisted boss, was a deacon at the congregation there in Denver, and I came to the faith. And so the church has always been my family. Everywhere I go, that's been my family. And so I was like, to Phil's point, when we came out here, we had already contacted Doreen, used to be a church secretary for anyone who doesn't know, and we knew about this place before we even set foot in the state. And then to a previous point, we stayed in what is now Marty's Clinic. It used to be a house. We stayed there for 7 weeks until we found a home. And so, all those things and more, the church, it's always been our family. That's what, and to me, as many, I feel obviously much closer to, I'm close with my family, but I feel much more intimate with the church family.
Yeah, there's something deeper that ties us together, right? You can't replace it.
How someone can do it without,
You can't replace it, and you can't mimic it either. I mean, you can try to mimic it, but you always find what's lacking, right? That, here's the deal, and this is sort of an elephant in the room, is that there are always examples of church community that's done poorly, and some people have some terrible horror stories that they can share with you about church hurt, and I was a part of this family, and I was rejected, or I was betrayed, and this goes, because again, the church is made up of people, and it's broken. So I don't want to paint this, just look at this through rose-colored glasses and everything's perfect. There's always difficulties, but that's true of any family that you're part of. There will be difficulties, and so if you're sitting here thinking, oh, this is all true, but I've got these stories I could tell you, I would believe them. I've seen them play out in real life. Thank God I've never experienced something that was so traumatic that caused me to not want to be a part of one, but that's not true for everybody. And there'll be people here that have those kind of stories to tell. But it was funny, you were talking about, you found a place as soon as you walked in, Phil moving from Connecticut, or Paul moving around state to state in the military. And just a funny story about how this works is you always find that I found in the churches of Christ especially, I've found that you can find somebody who's connected some way to some place you've already been before. It's funny how that works.
Oh, yeah.
And the first Sunday that we walked in the doors here, so we lived in Elizabethtown when we first moved here, we were equidistant from CV, and Camp Hill and Grace Point was right out the back door, and we had visited both of those places and wanted to come down and see what CV was all about. And walked in the door. Jim Bledsoe was the first person I met. He asked where we were from. Of course, he's from Tennessee, so we had we knew the places even though we had never crossed paths or our families before. But then the preacher got up, and it was this guy named Werkheiser. It's like, well, that's not a very common name. I've heard that name before. And sure enough, it was connected, because the first Sunday when I was in college, as a freshman, I walked into the college-age Bible class that day, and the teacher was also named Werkheiser. It was Corey. It was Jeff's younger brother. So I knew him before I even knew Jeff, because we happened to be in Cookville, Tennessee at the same time. And so I moved here, and I hear that name. I was like, are you by chance related? Yeah, that's my little brother. It's like, the family is far beyond just the walls of this building, right? No matter where you go, you can find those connections places. Something that David Young did in the book that I'd like to do together is he wanted to compare a couple of scriptures here. There's a command where Jesus, this is in John 13, Jesus is with his disciples in the upper room the night before he is being betrayed. And as part of that several chapter long conversation with his disciples, he says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. You must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." And the one way to know unmistakably if a Christian community is living out its mission is it has this core mark of love for one another. This will be present when we are doing it correctly. This is what Jesus said above all that his disciples needed to remember as he went back to heaven and they were left to carry on the mission together as the church. And it describes in Acts chapter 2 what that early church looked like, some of the things that they did. And let's look at Acts 2. I'm sorry if that's too small for y'all to see in the back. I tried to fit the whole passage on one slide so we didn't have to go back and forth. Let's read through this together and just look at this. Throw out some things. How is the early church living this out? This idea of, above all, loving one another just as Jesus had loved them. It says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." How do you see the early church living out this core commandment, this core mark that Jesus set up that's to be the center of our Christian community identity? Love for each other just as Jesus had for us. How are they accomplishing that? Oh.
Above all, there's several things up there, but
Yeah.
the first thing they devoted themselves to was God's word,
Yeah.
the apostles' teaching. So I think a commitment to God's word is going to help spur that love.
So using God's word to, love is driving them to dig in deeper. What did God leave for us through his word? Yeah.
Being together.
Being together, right? That idea of fellowship.
Yep.
Fellowship is not just the act of physically gathering in one place, although it's hard to do fellowship without that. But the fellow part of this, the togetherness, right? It goes more than just I'm physically in the same place as you. We are together for a deeper purpose than that. Yeah, Phil.
Yeah. That fellowship, it certainly isn't just a passive thing, because up in the beginning it says they devoted themselves to it.
Yeah.
So that makes it a very high priority for them.
Absolutely. It was a priority to be together. Especially, we're talking about living in a hostile environment. The church in Acts 2 was in a hostile environment. A lot of people did not want them to succeed, to be together, actively trying to make them not succeed. Ironically, that's what I think drove the rapid widespread of the church. As the church was persecuted and spread out, they took their faith with them and gave it to lots of other people in lots of other places. So by trying to squelch it, the early opponents of Christianity actually drove its spread even greater, like wildfire. But yes, devotion to that. That was a priority. They needed that.
Breaking of bread.
Breaking of bread, yeah. So
Communion, I believe, in that context.
yes, I think as well, Paul, that interpretation makes sense.
The reason they were.
Just as you talked about in your communion thought this morning, that idea of it's reminding us why we stick it out, right? Getting together and sharing communion with each other. Specifically, the Lord's Supper is important because that's our common purpose that we're reminding ourselves of. That strengthens us. That's the resilience, right? That sticking it out. There's the other reference to breaking bread down here. I think is a reference to hospitality, based on interpretation there. But both of those things are present using that same type of language, right? Communion itself, and just that idea of being hospitable. Opening our homes to each other, opening our lives to each other, right?
They looked out for each other's needs.
Yeah.
Verse 45.
Yeah, looking out for needs, right? By whatever means they had to, including selling the things they had to make sure that somebody else didn't go without. If I had a little bit more than I needed, you've got a little bit less than I need, or less than you need, I'm going to try to close the gap. That's what they did for each other. That happens here all the time. A lot of times we don't see it, but it's happening out there in the background. That's why I love what we're doing with the care communities. I hope we continue to keep that energized. That's so powerful of a witness out to the world that we are willing to do this for people that need it, right? And those gateway needs that come up, inevitably Carly sends that out, and you get what the message is a day or two later. Thank you, the needs are filled. That's amazing. That's the way it should be. That's the way this works, right? And that's each person that we do this with, even if they're not a member of our congregation, it's another statement, another testimony if we believe this to the point that we will live it out and practice it. Do you see anything else before we move on? Prayer. Yeah, praying together. What says I love you more than I'm not just saying I will pray for you, but I'm actually going before the Father on your behalf. That's so powerful. Everything that we have discussed so far in this class, and those things as well, about building a more resilient faith. I talked at the outset about, sure, a lot of these are individual disciplines that we will do, but it's more effective when we practice it alongside our community with each other. We're strengthened by that. How many have been in a discipleship group at one time or another? I'm not in one right now. I really miss that. I really need that. So I'm working on getting one together. It's been a long process, working with some weird schedules from the different people that want to be a part of this. But like Emily even commented to me the other day, is like, I hope you figure that out quick, because you're a different person when you're in one. I can notice when you're not. You really need it. And I don't take that as an insult. That's a serious compliment. It's like that's recognizing that when we are in close relationship on a consistent basis with other believers, we're a lot closer to who we need to be than when we're not, right? Iron sharpens iron. That's in the Proverbs for a reason. And so everything we are trying to do to be more resilient against a hostile world is magnified when we are doing it alongside other believers. One of these ways is we learn to persevere by watching others persevere. It's gut-wrenching sometimes to see the things that some people have to fight through, but yet it's motivation that, now I'm facing this bad situation. Somebody else faced that, and by God's grace, they made it through. Maybe I can too, right? Or you can go to that person for, hey, I've seen you struggle with this. I'm going through this. Do you have any advice for me? Can you pray for me with that?
I used to call the Munchkin ministry. I never called it the Munchkin ministry.
Okay.
I used to call it a therapy session.
Therapy session. 30 minutes of therapy, open therapy.
When people were discussing, little groups of people were discussing, that's exactly what they were discussing.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm experiencing, I have experienced what you're dealing with your kids. And I seem to have survived. and somebody asking, well, how did that work out and what did you do?
Yeah.
See, so there's value in that.
Yeah.
There's value in community like that.
Absolutely.
So it was therapy was.
And so there may be some things, though, that cause us to resist leaning in. We may make it a point to be here, but maybe we stay a little withdrawn. And this is going to be seasonal, of course. There will be ups and downs. Sometimes we're more engaged than others, but there may be times when we, out of the fear of judgment, resist opening ourselves up. What would somebody think about me if they knew X or Y about me? Well, chances are there's two ways to look at this. They have their own set of problems that they're also worried about, and they're not going to think the worst possible thing about you just because you struggle too. They're going to know that they also struggle and that you're in this together. But at the same time, it'd be just an act of compassion and love to know, just what you're talking about, Heather, the chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus. They would relish that opportunity to know that they could do that for someone else. Or a sense of not belonging. I talked about church hurt. This is another one where we feel a little bit on the outside and it's hard to break through to the inner circle, I guess, sometimes. Churches can get a little cliquey at times. I've been there, seen that. I see a lot less of that here than I have in other places. This is a very welcome and open community, especially to new people who come in to be a part of this. We have a good sense of, I think, welcoming people here. But that's not a given to always hold on to. That's intentional. You can lose that. But a sense of not belonging can cause someone to say, you know what, I just don't know that this place is a place that I can belong. We don't ever want to be that for other people. Or there could be an unwillingness to be vulnerable that keeps us from experiencing the maximum blessings of living in community with each other. I don't know. Whatever it is, there's reasons that keep us from maximizing the potential of this, but engaging, this is the last one I have for this, and we're not going to get to the discipleship things, but there will be other opportunities to work that into conversation, I'm sure. Engaging with our Christian community allows us to practice what I like to call the communal spiritual disciplines. If you were to do a Google search for lists of spiritual disciplines, there's a ton of things: Bible reading and prayer and expressing gratitude and memorization of scripture and journaling and meditation and giving and a lot of these things you can do by yourself, but there's a lot of these things that work a lot better when you do them together, like corporate worship. It's hard to do corporate worship. Again, some people will convince themselves they are doing that as they sit on their couch watching online church. There are some people that do that because they have to. They physically can't get out of the house, and that's their only connection. And I'm so thankful we have the ability for people to do that. They can't be here. I know Mark Nadeau has expressed this to me when Betty was homebound and he had to be with her 24/7. That was their lifeline to this church. And yet at the same time, he said, the moment I'm able to come back, I will be there at the door the moment it opens. I can't wait to be there. And so corporate worship, although we have options for people who physically can't be there, nothing replaces being at worship in person together. Corporate prayer, that idea of praying with each other, alongside each other for things. Practicing hospitality. Without community, how do you practice hospitality to somebody else? I can't think of how you would do that. Even confession as a spiritual discipline. Yeah, we confess to God, of course. I hope that's a regular part of your routine with God is practicing confession and getting your sins out in the open between you and God. But man, with accountability and trying to really get through a sin struggle, nothing replaces having a brother or sister alongside you that knows what you're going through and can relate to that and isn't judging you through that. And so finding that in community just magnifies what this spiritual discipline of confession actually does for us. And there's others. These things are practiced better together in community to help us grow spiritually and become more resilient. So thanks for being here. I appreciate all the input and the discussion that we had in this class. And there's so much more that would be great to do with this. I like that the elders keep a list of like situations to talk about, hypotheticals. How would you deal with X or Y? So that they practice this, as making decisions and thinking about the greater, good for the body as they do their work. And I've heard of what a few of those are. Being in a D group with a couple of the elders, they shared a couple of those. I wish we could have done something like that with this. What's a situation, and we work on how we incorporate this into our lives to build our resilience. I don't know, maybe there's a place for me to put something together in the future for that. But yeah, nevertheless, thank you for being here and being a part of this.
Good stuff.